Hello and welcome. You're watching Midday News on Rajya Sabha television. My name is Aishwarya Kapoor and these are the headlines. Government and opposition spar in Parliament over Dalit protests in Maharashtra. Opposition demands statement from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Rajya Sabha adjourned till 2 p.m. Government set to move a triple talaq bill in Rajya Sabha today. Government reaches out to opposition parties to ensure smooth passage of the bill. Dalit protests intensify in Mumbai. State buses damaged, rail blockade in several areas. Section 144 imposed in Thane. Violence sparked by clashes at the 200th anniversary celebrations of Bhima-Koregaon battle in Pune. Special CBI court defers sentencing for former Bihar Chief Minister Lalu Prasad Yadav and 15 others in a fodder scam till tomorrow. Case relates to fraudulent withdrawal of 89.27 lakh rupees from Deoghar Treasury between 1991 to 1994. And White House confirms that US has suspended $255 million military aid to Pakistan, says more actions can be expected in the coming days. China defends Pakistan, says that international community should acknowledge its contribution to fighting terrorism. First up, news from Parliament and opposition parties held up protests in the Rajya Sabha over the issue of Dalit protests in Maharashtra, forcing an adjournment of both Zero Hour and Question Hour. At the beginning of the Zero Hour, Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu asked the Leader of the Opposition, Ghulam Nabi Azad, to speak, where many opposition MPs rose to raise the issue of protests in Maharashtra. Amid noisy scenes, the chairman adjourned the Rajya Sabha till noon. Later, when the House reconvened at noon for question hour, opposition members continued their protests over the issue, leading to another adjournment till 2 p.m. And the Congress blamed the BJP and the RSS for the violence in Maharashtra. BJP, however, hit back, saying that the Dalits are the biggest beneficiaries of the government schemes. Let's take a listen.
तो सरकार भी जिम्मेदार है, क्योंकि ऐसा वो चीज़ चाहती है और मराठास और दलित में फूट डालने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। और ये कोशिश इसलिए कर रहे हैं कि उनको अगर ये दोनों महार और मराठा कम्युनिटी मिल गए, ये बड़ी शक्ति हो जाएगी। तो इसीलिए उनको अलग अलग रखने की कोशिश ये आरएसएस वाले और जो कट्टर हिंदुत्व की बात करते हैं, उनका ये चाल है। ये चाल को सफल नहीं होने देना ये सबका काम है।
देखिए, भारतीय जनता पार्टी के सबसे ज्यादा चुने हुए दलित प्रतिनिधि हैं। सर्व समाज को लेके काम करने की हमारी मनसा है, हमारी योजनाएं हैं। जो लोग लंबे समय तक घड़ियाली आंसू दलितों की हितों के लिए बहाए हैं, उनके जीवन मान को, उनकी रोजगार को, इनकी स्वाभिमान को ठीक करने के लिए कोरा काम किया है, कागजी काम किया है। अभी ठोस काम हो रहा है। बाकी हम अपेक्षा रखेंगे समाज में सौहार्द रहे, सदिच्छा रहे, भाईचारा रहे। इसमें सब लोगों को सबके साथ सबकी विकास हमारी नीति है।
And Union Law Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad is slated to move the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Bill 2017 in the upper house. The bill seeks to protect the rights of married Muslim women and will criminalize the practice of instant triple talaq. The bill also sets a jail term of 3 years for the husband and empowers the victim to approach a magistrate seeking subsistence allowance for herself and minor children. The government has reached out to the opposition to build a consensus ahead of tabling the bill, which was passed by the Lok Sabha last week. All right, let's get all the updates and a perspective on that. Kriti Mishra is now joining us live. Kriti, now it was really disheartening to see that after such a productive day in Rajya Sabha yesterday, today an uproar on violence in Maharashtra washed out almost the entire pre-lunch session. So what can we expect in the post-lunch session now?
Well, that's right, Aishwarya. So the Rajya Sabha could not transact any business in the pre-lunch session. Of course, it did conduct formal business, and several papers pertaining to ministries were tabled, and also several reports of parliamentary standing committees were also tabled. But remember, the opposition members raised the issue of Dalit protests in Maharashtra. The chairman, in fact, also allowed leader of opposition Gulab Nabi Azad to make his submissions, and later he also made it explicit that he would have allowed Naresh Agarwal, Sambhaji Chhatrapati and others to make their submission. But remember, all the opposition members stood on their toes and spoke concurrently that defies the tradition and established practice of the Rajya Sabha and also created pandemonium. So the chair was compelled to adjourn the House first till noon and then till 2 p.m. So it remains to be seen, and let's hope that normalcy returns in the second half in the Rajya Sabha today. Aishwarya?
But, as far as triple talaq bill is concerned, of course, BJP parliamentary board held a meeting this morning. Of course, government is looking for a consensus, but opposition has also been finalizing a strategy. So what are your sources telling you? What are the chances of the bill clearing upper house hurdle in this session itself?
Well, Aishwarya, the government has been working assiduously to ensure that this bill is passed in winter session itself. It has reached out to the opposition to build a consensus on this issue. In fact, right now I was speaking to MO's Parliamentary Affairs, Vijay Goel, and he told me that even for sending this bill to the select committee, the opposition has to give a notice. And so far, that notice hasn't been received by the government. So the strategy of the opposition, a lot of opposition parties were also saying that that would be decided on the floor of the House. So remember, the Congress has said that it has an issue with the criminalization clause in the triple talaq bill, because it says if the husband is imprisoned, who would provide financially for the abandoned wife and the kids? But remember, the government has made it clear that this would create a strong deterrent for men to go ahead and give triple talaq. So certainly the government is trying very hard, but the opposition parties have also made it clear that it is important to send the bill to the select committee for further scrutiny. But what would be the strategy and what would be the fate of the triple talaq bill would be decided on the floor of the House. Aishwarya?
Well, thank you so much, Kriti, for all those updates. So it remains to be seen what happens to the triple talaq bill. Of course, government wants the triple talaq bill to be cleared in this session itself, but whether the opposition will allow that, we'll have to wait and watch. Meanwhile, let's see what happened in the Lok Sabha today. Well, during question hour, questions were asked on the new coal allocation policy, flexi fare in the railways, explosion and bulletproof bunkers. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj answered a question on the steps taken by the government to make Hindi the official language of the UN as well.
कठिनाई तब पैदा होती है जब वोट में समर्थन देने के साथ उन पर राशि का बोझ पड़ता है। तो जो आर्थिक रूप से कमजोर देश हमें समर्थन देते हैं, वो यहाँ समर्थन देते हुए हिचक जाते हैं क्योंकि पैसे का बोझ उन पर आ रहा है। तो भी हम लोग लगे हुए हैं, हमारा प्रयास जारी है। जिस दिन वो समर्थन मिल गया और 129 देश पैसा देने को भी राजी हो गए, उस दिन ये आधिकारिक भाषा बन जाएगी।
However, the issue of Dalit violence in Koregaon town in Maharashtra also figured in the Lok Sabha, and raising the issue, Congress leader Mallikarjun Kharge also demanded a statement from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. However, Union Minister Anand Kumar said that Congress was using the issue for provocation. My colleague Ravindra Singh Shiran is now joining us live from Parliament. Ravindra, now, of course, the government and opposition again sparring in Lok Sabha as well over Dalit protests in Maharashtra. However, it did transact some business. Tell us more.
Yeah, good afternoon, Aishwarya. The first hour, that is the question hour of the Lok Sabha, went very smoothly, and 5 questions were asked, which includes the coal policy, the railway, how the railway is going to fight with the fog, which is one of the most dominant problem right now in the winter season especially. Also, the question on whether Hindi can be made an official language in the United Nations Assembly. These were the questions basically raised, and ministers responded to the members who has raised the question. Besides this, after the 0 hour started, when the papers were laid, immediately after the paper lay down, the Mallikarjun Kharge, the leader of the Congress party in the Lok Sabha, he raised the issue of the caste clashes which happened in the Koregaon of Maharashtra, and he demanded that a Supreme Court, sitting judge of the Supreme Court, should conduct an inquiry in this, and also the Prime Minister himself would come and he should speak and he should give his reply on the whole issue. But of course, the Anant Kumar, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, he said that the Congress party is trying to politicize the matter. This is a very sensitive matter, and a message how should be gone to the country that all the political parties and all the leaders of political parties, they are united, and they just want to let the violence not spread at any cost. And these are the main issues which was raised in the House. After that, because of the Congress party and the opposition was not happy with the response of the government, then they start creating some slogans in the House, and the Speaker was forced to adjourn the House briefly for 10 minutes. After the House was started again, then the House proceedings now are going very smoothly, and instead of going for a lunch break, the House has chose to sit in the lunch break, and they have taken a bill, the Constitution Amendment Bill, which was passed earlier, and because of some technical glitch, it has to return to the Lok Sabha, and now the discussion is going on. After this bill was passed, the Lok Sabha is slated to discuss the judges' salary law of Supreme Court and High Court, which was taken up for consideration passing yesterday, but the discussion could not be completed. Hope today the bill will be passed also. Aishwarya.
Right. Thank you, Ravindra, so much for all those updates on Lok Sabha. And BJP held its parliamentary party meeting at the Parliament today. The meet was attended by Prime Minister Narendra Modi besides other party leaders. Now, after the meeting, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Anant Kumar said that two important bills were discussed during the meeting. These include the Constitution 123rd Amendment Bill, which will give a constitutional status to OBC Commission, and the bill on triple talaq.
आज के ओबीसी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट के बारे में थावरचंद जी ने सबको अवगत कराए। आखिर में बोलते हुए हमारे देश के माननीय वित्त मंत्री और राज्यसभा में नेता माननीय अरुण जेटली जी ने ये कहा, यानी आज के दिन में कांग्रेस दोहरी मापदंड अपना रही है, क्योंकि लोकसभा में उन्होंने ये मुस्लिम महिला अधिकारों का संरक्षण का जो बिल है उसका समर्थन किया, और राज्यसभा में उसको रोकने के लिए या उसको साइड ट्रैक करने के लिए कोशिश कर रही है।
On to the big story coming in from Maharashtra, where Section 144 has been imposed in Thane till the midnight of 4th of January. Now, this is the violence sparked by clashes at the 200th anniversary celebration of a Bhima-Koregaon battle in Pune spread across the state. Now, heavy police deployment was put in place in sensitive areas across the state. Dalit outfits have called for a bandh across Maharashtra. Internet services are suspended in Aurangabad. Bus operations across the state have also been affected. The protesters blocked roads and also tried to halt rail traffic at various places. In Mumbai, Dalit protesters also tried to block tracks at the Thane railway station, but they were chased away by the police. Now, Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis ordered a judicial inquiry into the violence. He also announced a compensation for a man who was killed in clashes in Pune. Devendra Fadnavis also appealed for calm, urging people not to spread rumours on social media. The violence began after a man was killed in clashes during celebrations to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Bhima-Koregaon near Pune on Monday. The protest then spread to other parts of the state on Tuesday. Dalit communities in Mumbai called for a Rasta Roko protest as well, and the protesters also blocked roads in several areas of Mumbai and forced shops to shut down. News on the Ford scam case, and a special CBI court has deferred the sentencing for RJD chief Lalu Prasad Yadav and 15 others for tomorrow. The special court in Ranchi said it will pronounce the quantum of sentence for jailed former Bihar chief minister and 15 others in the case tomorrow. Now, amid tight security, Lalu Yadav was brought from Ranchi's Birsa Munda Central Jail to the special court for sentencing. Earlier, on 23rd of December last year, the court had convicted Lalu Yadav in the case for fraudulent withdrawal of money from the treasury in Deoghar between 1991 to 1994. In 2013 too, Lalu was convicted for a similar offence in Chaibasa treasury and was sentenced to 5 years in jail. He was released on bail granted by the Supreme Court almost 3 months after the conviction. Lalu Prasad is also facing trial in 3 more cases relating to the Ford scam. And in midday news, we'll take a very short break. Up next, we have all the international and sports news. So stay tuned.
and welcome. I'm Amritan Shirai and you're watching Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha TV.
DICC as on date provides a deposit guarantee of 1 lakh rupees. And at this moment, the people are happy.
If a company fails, then the company is liquidated.
Option for resolution, it gives about 4 or 5 mechanisms like mergers and acquisition, wrapping up and so on.
Watch Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back after the break. The US says that it will likely announce further actions to pressure Islamabad to do more to fight terrorism. This comes after the US announced that it was withholding $255 million in aid from Pakistan because of its failure to cooperate fully in America's fight against terrorism. The White House confirmed that the US has suspended military aid to Pakistan for now, saying that the fate of such assistance will depend on Islamabad's response to terrorism. The PTI has quoted a senior American official as saying that the US President Donald Trump expects Pakistan to take decisive action against terrorists and militants on its soil, and that Pakistan's actions in support of the South Asia strategy will ultimately determine the trajectory of our relationship, including future security assistance. It is noteworthy that US President Donald Trump's first tweet of year 2018 was a blistering attack on Pakistan, accusing the country of lies and deceit and making fools of US leaders and offering little help in hunting terrorists in Afghanistan.
The administration is withholding $255 million in assistance to Pakistan. There are clear reasons for this. Pakistan has played a double game for years. They work with us at times, and they also harbor the terrorists that attack our troops in Afghanistan. That game is not acceptable to this administration. We expect far more cooperation from Pakistan in the fight against terrorism. The President is willing to go to great lengths to stop all funding from Pakistan as they continue to harbor and support terrorism.
Meanwhile, Pakistan Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi on Tuesday chaired a cabinet meeting over Donald Trump's tweet at a separate meeting of the National Security Committee in Islamabad, chaired by Abbasi and attended by senior politicians, military officials and civil servants. The Pakistan government said that it was disappointed by Donald Trump's stance, but it will not act in haste over what he had said. The NSC said in a statement that remarks by US leadership contradicted facts and negated the decades of sacrifices made by the Pakistani nation. Pakistan had also summoned the US Ambassador David Hale on Monday in protest at Donald Trump's allegation. Now, following the NSC meeting, the foreign minister of the country, Khwaja Asif, challenged Trump's claim that the US has given Pakistan more than $33 billion as aid over the last 15 years. In a tweet, he said that Donald Trump could hire a US-based audit firm to verify the $33 billion aid figure and let the world know who is lying and deceiving. Meanwhile, after US President Donald Trump's rebuking Pakistan for its reluctance to act against terror, China came out in defense of its ally. Now, China has said that the world should acknowledge its allies' outstanding contribution to counter terrorism. Now, responding to questions about Donald Trump's criticism of Pakistan, China said, and I quote, Pakistan has made enormous efforts and sacrifices for the fight against terrorism and has made a very outstanding contribution to the global cause of counter-terrorism. The international community should acknowledge that, unquote. China also said that it was glad to see Pakistan engaging in international cooperation, including counter-terrorism, to contribute to regional peace and stability. And after Pakistan, the United States has now threatened to stop all financial aid to Palestine if they refuse to engage in peace negotiations. In a tweet on Tuesday, US President Donald Trump said that the United States may withhold payments to Palestinians because they are no longer willing to talk peace. He said that Washington was giving Palestinians hundreds of millions of dollars a year for nothing, saying that the US received no appreciation or respect in return. The US ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has also said that Trump has no intention to continue funding the UN Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian Refugees unless the Palestinians come to the negotiation table to move forward on peace talks. The move comes almost a month after Donald Trump's 6th of December announcement that he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and would move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv.
The president has basically said that he doesn't want to give any additional funding or stop funding until the Palestinians are agreeing to come back to the negotiation table. And what we saw with the resolution was not helpful to the situation. We're trying to move for a peace process, but if that doesn't happen, the president's not going to continue to fund that situation.
And the Donald Trump administration in the U.S. is considering a proposal that may result in large-scale deportation of Indians from the U.S. The proposal is being shared as a memo in the Department of Homeland Security. It is part of Donald Trump's Buy American, Hire American initiative promised during his 2016 campaign. The new regulations will prevent foreign workers from getting H-1B visa extensions while their green card applications are pending. The existing rules allow the administration to extend the H-1B visas beyond the allowed 2-year period term if a green card is due for approval. But the move is likely to affect 50,000 to 75,000 Indian employees in the U.S., most of whom are working in the IT sector, amid fears that they may be deported back to India. And on to the other top international story. An InterKorean hotline between North and South Korea is set to restart from today. Now, this comes after North Korean leader Kim Jongun said that he was open to dialogue with Seoul and to sending a team for the Winter Olympic Games there. In response, South Korea also offered to hold high-level talks on 9th of January to discuss the North's participation in the Olympics as well as other matters of mutual interest. A North Korean official announced the telephone hotline's reopening in a televised statement on Tuesday, adding that Kim Jong-un had welcomed Seoul's support for his overtures. The two nations have not held high-level talks since December 2015.
우리는 최고 지도부의 뜻을 받들어 진지한 입장과 성실한 자세에서 남조선 축과 긴밀한 연계를 취할 것이며 우리 대표단 파견과 관련한 실무적 문제를 논의해 나갈 것입니다.
정부는 어제 우리 측이 밝힌 판문점 남북 연락 채널의 정상화 제안에 대해 북측이 호응해 나온 것을 환영하며 이 판문점 연락 채널을 통해 어제 제의한 남북 당국 회담 개최와 관련된
And US President Donald Trump has said that his nuclear button was much bigger and more powerful than North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's. Now, Donald Trump's tweet is the latest contribution to the long bickering between the two nuclear-armed states. Now, Trump's response comes after the North Korean leader in a televised New Year address said that the entire US was within the range of his nuclear weapons and that a nuclear button is always on his desk. The North Korean dictator also ordered his scientists to build the country's biggest intercontinental ballistic missile, which would be launched in the month of September on the 70th anniversary of the regime. While Kim Jong continued his confrontation stance against Donald Trump, he had in his New Year's Day speech said that he was open to dialogue with South Korea, and the US State Department has said that it was skeptical of North Korean leader's sincerity if such talks do happen.
Kim Jong-un may be trying to drive a wedge of some sort between the two nations, between our nation and the Republic of Korea. I can assure you that that will not happen. That will not occur. We are very skeptical of Kim Jong-un's sincerity in sitting down and having talks. Our policy hasn't changed. The South Koreans' policy has not changed, that we both support a denuclearized Korean peninsula.
Big story coming in from Iran, where the country's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on Tuesday blamed Iran's enemies for stirring up unrest in the country as the death toll from days of anti-government protests climbed to 21. It is the 7th day of the protest today, and more than 450 protesters have been arrested in the capital Tehran and hundreds of others have been detained around the country. Several footages showed Iranian protesters chanting death to dictator and down with clerical regime, as security forces struggle to contain the boldest challenge to Iran's leadership since the unrest in 2009. The demonstrations that broke out last week were initially focused on economic hardships and alleged corruption, but later turned into political rallies. In his first remarks since the demonstrations erupted last Thursday, Khamenei accused the nation's enemies of joining forces and blamed them for protests that have turned violent. However, the US has branded as complete nonsense Iran's accusation that its enemies have been behind the violent protests. US envoy to the UN, Nikki Haley, said that the protests were spontaneous, adding that the US planned to call an emergency UN meeting on the situation.
Now the Iranian dictatorship is trying to do what it always does, which is to say that the protests were designed by Iran's enemies. We all know that's complete nonsense. The demonstrations are completely spontaneous. They are virtually in every city in Iran. This is the precise picture of a long oppressed people rising up against their dictators.
And on to sports news now. Ace Indian tennis player Yuki Bhamri has advanced to the second round of the ongoing Tata Open tournament in Pune. Yuki Bhamri beat Arjuna Khare 6-3, 6-4 in the opening round. Bhamri will now face 8th seed Frenchman Pierre-Hugues Herbert. Meanwhile, India's Sumit Nagpal bowed out of the tournament. Nagpal lost to Belarusian Ilya Ivanchka in the doubles event. Indian pair Jeevan Neduncezyan and Rohan Bopanna qualified for the quarterfinals. They beat their Indian rivals Liana Pace and Purav Raja 6-3, 6-2. And that's all in this edition of Midday News. Up ahead is Khabar Dopeher. Thanks for watching.